Hello, everyone, and good evening. My name's Don Arleth, and welcome to our main edition of World News Tonight here on TVP World. Millions of Poles could get a major change in the law they've been demanding for years. The Civil Unions Bill is about to be presented in Parliament, potentially allowing unmarried and same-sex couples more rights and privileges under the new law. Also coming up tonight, an exclusive interview with the Polish Finance Minister, Andrzej Domański. That's still ahead, but first up, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. Prime Minister Donald Tusk to visit Serbia to discuss Belgrade's EU accession. The near future cannot be positive, warns Italian Defense Minister at the G7 summit in Italy. And not one, but four new Sumatran tigers, the latest addition to the Polish zoo. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk will travel to Serbia next week, a senior government official told TVP World. There, Tusk will discuss the possibility of EU membership for the Balkan state.
The visit comes at a time when Serbia is considering its allegiances. Historically, Serbia has been a staunch ally and partner of Russia. The country has shown no restraint in deepening its energy dependence on Russia. Serbia historically had strong ties with Russia, which only strengthened after the Balkan Wars of the 1990s, in which NATO forces intervened. However, in recent years, the country has also shown a keen interest in joining the European Union. The country has also condemned Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, although it hasn't joined sanctions against the aggressor. On TVP World's program On the Record, the Serbian ambassador to Poland downplayed the relationship with Russia.
To talk about some kind of alliance, I think it's exaggeration. It was historically a country with whom we maintained good relations. But to talk that we're looking only towards Russia, I think it's an exaggeration and it's not true, actually. First foreign policy goal for us is membership in European Union.
For that foreign policy goal to be attained, Poland will be an important partner for Serbia in the short term, as it will hold the presidency over the Council of the European Union in the first half of 2025.
Now, for a big choice for Moldova on the eve of presidential elections and European referendum. Will the tiny country of 2.5 million choose a prosperous path westward or an uncertain and less stable dependency on Russia? Out of 11 presidential candidates, 5 are known for their pro-Russian politics. Our correspondent, Karolina Stoltzman, is in Chisinau. Good evening, Karolina. So can you tell us more about the candidates that Moldovans will vote for tomorrow?
Good evening, Don. So Moldovans will head to the polls tomorrow to elect their new president, as well as take part in the referendum that could see their constitution amended to include Chisinau's European ambitions. Now, when it comes to the presidential election, and let's take a look at the top 2 contenders. So, of course, the first one is Maia Sandu from the Party of Action and Solidarity. She is the incumbent president. And according to the most recent polls, she can expect up to 36% of support tomorrow. She, of course, is a clear pro-European candidate, and it was her that put Moldova on the roadmap to the European Union. Now, her top contender will be Alexandru Stoianoglu, who is coming from the Party of Socialists, a clearly pro-Russian political group. Now, Stoianoglu can expect 9% of the votes tomorrow. Now, this staggering difference between the two is because, according to CBS research, some 30% of Moldovans were still undecided on who they will support in the elections tomorrow. And this is exactly where Moscow comes in, or at least it tries to, because the low percent support for Stoianoglu doesn't mean that Russia isn't trying to interfere with these elections. In fact, quite the opposite is true. Take a look at my report. Moldovan authorities confirmed that Russia has tried to interfere with this weekend's elections on multiple occasions. During last year's local election, Moscow pumped in $55 million to meddle with the vote. This October, it spent $15 million to disrupt Chisinau's European ambitions. On the eve of the election, a cyber attack was launched against the Moldovan parliament. One figure that experts say is crucial to understanding Moscow's grip on Chisinau is Ilan Shor, a pro-Russian Moldovan oligarch. He was exiled from Moldova in 2014 following an operation he orchestrated in which the equivalent of $1 billion disappeared from Moldovan banks. Now, Shor has become a leading Russian political actor, aiming to derail Moldova Moldova from its European course, and the Russian influence reaches all the way to Moldovan pockets. Moldovan journalist Mariuța Nistor infiltrated the pro-Russian political movement and found that Moscow was bribing people to vote no in the referendum and in favor of Russia-friendly candidates in the presidential election. And money seems to be the only motivator.
They don't believe Russia propaganda. They will not vote with Shor's candidate, or not vote no at referendum if the Moscow will not give the money.
With almost 30% of voters still undecided on who they'll support, Ilan Shor might have an ace up his sleeve, as he was expected to announce his support for one of the pro-Russian candidates.
Shor announced the candidate. Shor has 3 variants.
His possible choices, according to the journalist, are Victoria Fortuna with 1.4% support so far, Vasile Tarlev with 1.3% support, or a third, still secret option, leaving out openly pro-Russian Stoyanoglo. Shor's decision to voice his support might swing the undecided 30% of voters toward Moscow and away from the European Union. But the EU has its eye on these elections. A dedicated committee has been sent to Chisinau to observe the elections in the face of Russian interference.
We are protecting the freedom of these elections and impartiality of these elections.
Pro-European Maia Sandu is expected to win the first round of the election, but not with high enough support to secure a second term in office. As for the referendum, recent polls showed that over 55% of those asked say they support the amendment of the Moldovan constitution to include Chisinau's European ambitions, despite Moscow's relentless propaganda.
The mission of UNIFIL has to be reviewed, EU diplomacy chief Josep Borrell said at the G7 summit in Italy taking place over the weekend. The festering military conflicts in the Middle East and in Ukraine are at the forefront of discussions between the defense ministers of 7 global powers there. Piotr Miszczuk has this next report.
As explosions batter Lebanon's capital Beirut, and Ukraine is cleaning up after another Russian strike. High officials from Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the UK and the US are growing increasingly concerned with the global situation and future moves.
The brutal Russian aggression in Ukraine and the indeed critical situation in Middle East, combined with the profound instability of sub-Saharan Africa and the increasing tension in the Indo-Pacific region, highlight a deteriorated security framework with forecasts for the near future that cannot be positive.
Speaking to the press, EU chief diplomat Josep Borrell pointed out that a change might be needed in how UN forces deployed in the Middle East operate. The statement came as the UN peacekeeping mission in Lebanon, also known as UNIFIL, recently found itself in the crosshairs between Israeli forces and Hezbollah.
United Nations forces have to be respected all over the world, and in particular where they are doing an incredible job as peacekeepers. Well, not peacekeepers anymore because there is no more peace in the world. Maybe the mission of the UNIFIL has to be reviewed, but the first thing to do is a ceasefire.
While the UN is attempting to stabilize the situation in the Middle East, despite Israel's outspoken objections, the war in Ukraine still requires extra funding and military training from the most powerful countries in the world.
We have spent over 8 billion euros this year and will spend even more. Next year it will be over 4 billion, so we are already very much on track. We continue to try to make further funds available, but above all to ensure that the training of Ukrainian soldiers progresses, because this is playing an increasingly central role.
The G7 ministerial meeting on defense was launched on Friday and will draw to a conclusion on Sunday.
Ukrainians living in Warsaw protested today against an often overlooked aspect of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The demonstrators wanted to bring the attention to the devastating environmental impact of the war, also known as ecocide. The protest was organized by Euromaidan Warsaw, an NGO helping Ukrainian refugees and advocating for more Western support for Kyiv. Kazimierz Wysiak reports.
Justice for nature. This is what the Ukrainian protesters here on one of the main streets of the old town in Warsaw are currently shouting. They are demanding justice for the so-called ecocide, the negative impact that the Russian invasion of Ukraine has on the environment. The organizers of this protest from Euromaidan Warsaw usually point to the countless losses of human lives in Ukraine, but today they gathered here to raise awareness on the negative impact that Russia's war in Ukraine has on the ecology.
We know that nature does not have the borders, and although the people may not suffer directly from the war that is happening right now in Ukraine, they may suffer from the consequences of the ecocide that Russia is committing right now in Ukraine.
Several dozen protesters who gathered here also remind that many endangered animal species have been hurt as the result of the war. They have been forced to move after their natural habitats, and that decades of environmental work by activists in Ukraine has been for nothing because of the war. According to Statista.com, 175 million metric tons of carbon dioxide has been released into the atmosphere since the beginning of the war in 2022. That's almost twice as much as the entire carbon dioxide emissions of Belgium in 2023. The protesters here also demand for the countries of the world to take action and officially condemn the Russian ecocide. From Warsaw, TVP World, Kazimierz Łysiak.
Migration continues to be a hot topic in Poland. 38 NGOs and social movements are demanding discussions with the government on the recently announced migration strategy. The organization sent a joint letter to Prime Minister Donald Tusk on Friday, raising concerns over the proposed solutions on border control, specifically the temporary suspension of the right to asylum. Kazimierz Łysiak has this next report.
Close to 40 NGOs are not too happy with the recently announced migration policy of the Polish government. The strategy is a response to the Belarusian regime sending waves of migrants across the Polish border since 2021 in an effort to destabilize both Poland and the EU.
After reading the document published on the website of the Chancellery of the Council of Ministers, we express our deep opposition to the restrictions on the right to asylum announced in the strategy.
The tighter migration policy announced by Prime Minister Donald Tusk last week was recently revealed in full on the government's website, and the devil lies in the detail.
If there is a threat of destabilization of the country by the influx of immigrants, it should be possible to temporarily and territorially suspend the right to accept asylum applications. Appropriate laws should take into account parliamentary control mechanisms, protection of vulnerable groups, and the experience of other countries.
The points on the special protection of vulnerable groups like women and children, as well as appropriate parliamentary oversight, helped alleviate some of the NGOs' concerns.
We saw how they later tried to improve on that initial announcement. It was the first impression which made us react. Still, we NGOs are not exactly in agreement with this strategy.
According to political commentators, the full document made it clear that the suspension of asylum won't be a black and white situation.
When the Prime Minister said that we were suspending the right to asylum, all the red lights went off for me. After he clarified it, I don't see anything scary about it. His reasons are sound.
Prime Minister Tusk presented his migration plan to EU leaders during a summit in Brussels on Thursday. The summit ended with a statement of full support by European heads of state.
Millions of Poles may finally get a major legal change they have been yearning for. The Polish government has put forward the long-awaited civil union bill, whereby non-married couples will be provided with several extra rights. More importantly, though, this includes same-sex couples who will be granted at least some of the rights they are demanding here in Poland. And Poland's the EU's least LGBTQ+ friendly country. Piotr Miszczuk has this next report.
After some tug-war between various groups within the ruling coalition, it looks like a civil union trade-off has been clinched. The presented draft bill is geared at putting an end to the 20 years of fighting for equality, said its author, Polish Equality Minister Katarzyna Kotula.
In this draft bill, there is a registration of a civil partnership in the registry office, there is a common surname, there is the so-called small custody, there is no adoption of children, that is, this issue that has been controversial in the ruling coalition from the beginning.
Alongside these points, the bill stipulates that people in a civil partnership would be allowed to receive medical information about their partner, arrange their funeral and inherit their possessions, to name but a few. Should the bill come to force, Poland will cease to be Europe's worst country for the LGBT+ community, but the road to equality is bumpy, according to pro-LGBT+ activists.
You are happy because something is finally going on, and it's the government's proposal rather than just an initiative of a single party. But at the same time, this is definitely not enough, and we already hear voices from different political actors telling us that this is already too much.
Despite the fact that the bill has been deemed a government draft, Minister Kotula, who hails from the most pro-LGBT+ coalition grouping, the Left, would have to bridge the cleavage between her group and the most conservative faction in the ruling coalition, the Polish People's Party.
I suspect some of them will dissent, but since I think our main objection, as far as I understand, was removed from the project, that means that more members of my party will vote for. It's likely to vote for. So you don't need all of us to vote for.
Even if the ruling coalition reaches an understanding, it will then need President Andrzej Duda to sign the bill into life. It's unlikely, given that he originates from the conservative Law and Justice Party and took flack for calling LGBT an ideology back in the heat of the 2020 presidential election campaign.
The generation of my parents did not fight so that now we agree with another ideology to come. An ideology even more destructive for a human being. An ideology which, under the phrase of respect and tolerance, hides deep intolerance.
Though the civil unions bill would regulate all couples, it is same-sex couples that remain the bone of contention. But Poles seem to champion this idea. A 2024 study by pollster Ipsos shows that a remarkable 60% support the introduction of civil unions law in Poland.
And now, on a more joyous note, the Wrocław Zoo has announced the birth of 4 extremely rare Sumatran tigers. The adorable felines were born in July, but their caretakers chose to keep the arrival of the cubs a secret for fear that they might not survive. Gabriela Fresnak has more.
The Sumatran tiger is on the brink of extinction, with only 400 tigers of this species remaining in the wild. Wrocław Zoo, the only facility in Poland which keeps these magnificent predators, calls the birth an amazing success. Only 4 other European wildlife parks have welcomed Sumatran tiger cubs this year.
The birth of 4 tigers, with all of them surviving, fully developing, and spending their days frolicking in the enclosure, is extremely rare. Sumatran tigers are a critically endangered species. It's a huge success.
The Wrocław Zoo has been caring for Sumatran tigers since the 1960s. The great-great-grandmother of Nuri, the mother of the newborn cubs, was also born at this zoo. Caretakers of the newborn tigers report that the parents, Nuri and Tenga, are doing a great job tending to their offspring.
This is an unusual situation, as the father is helping to raise the cubs. Males are often separated from the mother after the birth, and here the father even learned to groom the cubs.
The cubs experienced the outside enclosure for the first time earlier this week and can now be admired at the Wrocław Zoo during the opening hours.
And now it's time for an exclusive interview with the Polish Finance Minister Andrzej Domański, conducted by TVP World's Ben Lee.
As Europe navigates the uncertainties of economics, the role of financial leadership is more critical than ever. Andrzej Domański, Poland's finance minister and a seasoned expert in capital markets, brings us years of experience from the financial sector to his current role in shaping the country's future. Hello, and thanks for being with us here on TVP World.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, let's start with the most recent announcement by the Polish Prime Minister's migration policy, because, well, a lot of talk revolves around the humanistic side of things. I would like to ask you about the economic impact. Is it true that we do need migrants for our current economy?
First of all, we need control over who is entering our country. That's very basic, and it's very important for our government to regain this control. And of course, our economy needs skilled workers who can help us in accelerating our growth. Our economy is no longer competing on very low wages. We want our economy to compete in the fields of more advanced technologies, where people with some specific skills are really needed. So actually what we are talking right now in terms of economics is what kind of skills we would like to invite to Poland.
Right. Now, the policy announced by the Prime Minister, do you think that that might send a signal that, well, for specific, even though it is specific to asylum seekers, do you think that might send a signal that Poland is not open for migrants, even though we are on a kind of market that is already competing for more high-skilled labor workers?
Poland is open for high-skilled workers from other countries. For example, we would be really happy to see more people from, let's say, OECD countries to come to Poland. In recent years, our economic situation has improved. Even in 2024, real wages went up by 9%. And it means that Poland is really attractive place to live. So once again, we would like highly skilled workers to come to Poland to help our economy in its development. But of course, we need to have control over who is entering our country.
Right, and speaking of Poland becoming an increasingly attractive place for foreigners to come, and also having to exert control over who gets to come in and not. In recent weeks, of course, we're talking a lot about the new migration strategy. And just a few weeks ago, the dominating topic is kind of the visa scandal. How do you envision, like, the Poland when it comes to its migration policy? Do you think that it needs an overhaul, a policy reset? And if so, what would this look like? And is there more kind of a protectionist touch policies to come?
Of course, the visa scandal that took place in 2023 was a hit, and for the previous government because actually they lost control over who is entering our country. Foreigners were able to buy visas without any control, and it was very, very dangerous. So for sure, having control over who is coming to our country is important. It's crucial for our society. And one more thing, I strongly believe that social cohesion is very important for growth of our economy, and this is why we would like more of the people from the Western European countries, from OECD countries, to move to Poland.
Okay. Now, I would like to talk about the 2025 budget as well. We do know that you had to rebalance it. And given the flood that just happened, did that throw a wrench into the plan? Did it make everything a lot more difficult when it comes to balancing the budget?
Of course, the flood is a tragedy for people who are living in the southwest part of our country. From the economy perspective, we have guaranteed additional funds in our 2025 budget. We are also happy to see more flexibility in spending EU funds that could be used to rebuild towns and villages that were destroyed by the flood. And of course, we had to make some small changes in our 2025 budget. It's very important to know that we expect Polish economy to grow next year by 3.9%. So we are really accelerating. This year, we expect something around 3%. next year 3.9. So Poland is one of the fastest growing EU economy, and we need lots of more of investments.
All right, so 3%, 3.9, that sounds like a very optimistic figure. I think previously you also pointed to estimated growth by 3.7% and now have since updated the number. What's giving you kind of this kind of optimism when it comes to the growth?
I mean, it's not optimistic; it's realistic, and it's close to the market consensus of Bloomberg or Reuters, the optimism is I mean, this projection, this forecast is based on accelerating investments, accelerating spending of EU funds. Still, the retail sales in Poland is pretty strong. As I said, wages are growing at the highest pace in the 21st century in my country, above 9%. So there are many engines of our growth. Having said that, we want more, and of course there are also threats to this scenario. One of the biggest obstacle this year is, of course, the very sluggish recovery in Eurozone, and especially in our most important trading partner, German economy. So this is why we are hoping that recent cuts by European Central Bank will help Eurozone economy and therefore will help Polish exporters.
And when it comes to spending, now we do know that Poland's trying to boost its defense spending up to 4.7% GDP. Do you think that with the current economy, Poland will be able to sustain that 4.7%? Is it excessive? Meanwhile, we do know that it is necessary to protect the eastern flank, but do you think that that would have a significant impact on spending that much on defense?
Security is our priority. We are all well aware what's happening in Ukraine right now, and it's our duty to secure funding for our army, for development of of its equipment. Poland is not only spending the highest share of its GDP among NATO members, but also within those spendings we have the highest share of spending that actually goes into the modernization of our army. So it's very, very important for us, and of course it's sustainable. Having said that, of course it's also a challenge for the budget.
Right. So when we spend that much on defense, do you think that there are some of the projects that couldn't be done because of the spending, or is there any other kind of program that had to be cut to foot that bill?
No, we are investing heavily. As I said, we are sure that we need more investments in our economy. This is why we secured nearly 5 billion Polish zloty, so more than 1 billion euro, just for the 2025, to be invested in first nuclear plant in Poland. We will invest heavily in grid, in renewables, as I'm absolutely sure that what we need is acceleration of green energy transformation, and this is our goal, the goal of the government.
Well, okay, here's a sensitive one. Do you think that, well, with Poland spending so much on defense, we're kind of carrying the weight of some of the countries? Do you think that perhaps we could have even more robust healthcare system or a social kind of safety net and all that if some of the other countries also kind of bring up their defense spending to a more baseline level?
Security is our priority. It's our priority to modernize army, because we know what's happening in Ukraine right now. Having said that, of course, we are trying to convince our Western European partners to invest more in their army. What we need is more European solidarity in terms of common defense. As currently, to be honest, the effort made by Western European partners is not high enough.
Right, and last but not least, do you think, like you mentioned, perhaps there's not enough effort on the Western partner side? Anything the European Union can do to perhaps help Poland out a little bit so it doesn't feel like we're the only ones footing the bill?
I mean, we are in a discussion with our Western European partners. We are in this very specific moment when we are still waiting for the new Commission, and we will have a new US president within 3 weeks from now. So I believe that it will be a very good moment to discuss more and discuss spending, common EU spending on defense.
Right, a very critical and pivotal moment indeed. Thank you so much for your input and insight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. And that was Finance Minister Mr. Andrzej Domański. Thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But in the meantime, please stay tuned to TVP World.
And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next time. Good night.